Hello, this is Brooks Whittington with halfwheel.com. Today we're taking a look at the S.T.Dupont Double Cigar Cutter. Now this is one of two brand new cutter styles that the company introduced at the 2019 IPCPR Convention and Trade Show. Both of them have a double guillotine cutter as well as an additional feature. The first one has a cutter as well as the fact that it transforms into a nifty cigar stand. However, the product of today's review is the Double Cigar Cutter, which has not only that aforementioned double guillotine cutter, but also a V-cut on top of that in the same product. All right, so now in terms of some physical specifications, the cutter measures 3.07 inches long, which, as you can see when compared against a dollar bill, is about half of that size of a dollar bill, give or take. Maybe a little bit more. 1.85 inches wide when it's closed, but opens up to 2.75 inches when it's open, and is only 0.4 inches thick. It weighs 3.63 ounces, and during my testing, I determined that it can cut the caps off of about 70 ring gauge pretty easily, and is actually able to cut a 60 ring gauge cigar completely in half. You can fit that right through there on the double guillotine side here and cut it right in half. While the V cutter easily cuts up to 64 ring gauge and can go a little higher, but that's where its sweet spot is in terms of how big you can go. Now, the retail price on these is $209, and it's available in 3 colorways: red and black, as you can see here, chrome and chrome, and the chrome and the black. All right, now we're through that. I wanted to show everybody how the cutter actually works and cut some cigars. So this is a relatively simple product in that in order to open the cutter, you basically take the trigger here on the side and you want to push in, which opens up the blades on a spring-loaded rail system. When you're cutting through and you're actually closing it, you just push down again and it locks into place nice and simple. Now the V-cut on top of this cutter is not a deep V-cut that is something like the Colibri has. It's a fairly standard depth, but it does have a reverse V blade, which essentially means that the first pieces of the blade to touch the cap of the cigar are the sides as opposed to the tip on the top of the blade itself. So when you're going to actually use the V-cut, you take your cap of your cigar, you put it into the opening there, and you want to push in just a little bit more than you normally would, just give it a little more pressure than you normally would, and you are going to just go through in a nice, clean, even motion, and it cuts right through. And as you can see, a very nice, very clean, and very even cut there. When you're using the double guillotine blade, you're going to do the same thing in terms of how you are going to push through. But you always know which side to use because it's the same side as the opening in the V-cut. But what I like to do is actually turn this around so that it's always on the top. You can use it on the bottom, and I did that a little bit, but my balance was off just a little bit more than I wanted it to be. So when I turned it around, it worked out a lot better. You basically want to put the cap of the cigar into the opening. The cool thing about this cutter is that you can see exactly how much you're taking off. And so you put it in, you get what you want in terms of the amount you want to take off, and then you just push through. And as you can see, a very nice and sharp cut. Okay, so now I'm going to go through some really quick good and bad things about the cutter, as I found when I was using this for about 5 weeks on every cigar that I smoked. Very simply, one of the best things about this actual cutter is the cuts themselves. They're very, very clean for the most part, vast majority of the time. There's very little damage that I found to the wrapper or to the cap. It was just basically take out the cigar, put it in, cut it, and move on with your smoke. And that's really what it should be in a cigar cutter that especially costs this much money. The it's very simple to use. It's very light when you're talking about carrying it around. It's very easy to put in your pocket, forget about it. There were many times when I actually did just that. The blades are sharp, and it's just an overall really nice product. Now, another thing that you have to love about it, and it's very obvious, is the fact that you do have two blades in one product. It's not that easy, apparently, to release a cutter like this because there's just not that many of them on the market at the moment. And to me, it seems like that when you're talking about a product like this, it would be very easy to make it so that it's awkward or something of that nature when you're using it. This is very well balanced, and it's very easy to use, as I mentioned before. It also looks great, and it's built very, very nicely in terms of the product and the quality. You can tell that it uses quality products for the most part in terms of what it's made out of. Now, some of the bad things that I didn't necessarily like about it, the first thing you have to think about is the price. $209 is a lot of money for any cutter, even one that has two cutters involved in it. That's part of what you're paying for, of course, as well as the name of S.T.Dupont, but it is still quite a bit of money and not something that can be taken lightly. There was a couple of issues that I had in terms of when I'm feeling this trigger mechanism, the rail system on it. It feels a little bit loose sometimes. It's not enough to actually have a problem when it's closed. I feel like they could have some issues sticking. It did not, to be clear, I didn't have any issues. I'm just thinking long term that if there's going to be some problems, it's probably going to be with this rail system here. I had no issues whatsoever with that when in the 5 weeks that I was using it. Another issue is the problem with the Chrome version. This version I did not have this issue with, but with Chrome versions, you have problems with fingerprints and dirt and things showing up on the actual cutter itself very, very easily, very difficult to get rid of from what I saw when I was actually looking at them at a store that I went to. I wanted to see all the versions. That's definitely something to think of when you're talking about which actual version to choose. And finally, unlike some of the other S.T.Dupont products, this actually is made in China and not in France. Something that some people may find important. It's very well built, so for me, it's not that big of a deal, but it's definitely something that people should be aware of. All right, now, as part of this review, I wanted to go through a really quick comparison. There's just not that many cutters that have the same format as the S.T.Dupont in terms of having two different blades in one portable product. But the one that springs to mind instantly was the Colibri SV Cut. This has a V cut on the front and a double guillotine on the back. And we've already reviewed this. You can see the review on the half wheel. However, there are some major differences between the two. And the first one that you notice pretty quickly is the fact that the SV cut is about twice as thick as the S.T.Dupont in terms of how big it is. It's quite a bit more bulky as well. The weight is also substantially different between the two. The S.T.Dupont is about 104 grams, give or take, while the SV cut is 175 grams. So you're talking about just over 70 grams of difference, and that's a huge difference when you're talking about carrying it around or wanting to make sure that it's something that's in your pocket. When I reviewed this, it was easy to carry around in terms of the size of it, but it was very obvious that it was in your pocket every time. It wasn't something that I really wanted to actually put in my pocket and leave there, whereas the S.T.Dupont is definitely something that I was easily able to put in my pocket and forget about. Now, in terms of actually cutting the cigars, both of them, as I said, have this the same look in terms of the V cut on the front of the Colibri as well as the top of the S.T.Dupont. And both of those V-cuts actually work fairly well and fairly pretty much the same in terms of that. However, there was a major difference in the double guillotine, not in the cuts necessarily, but in the fact that with the SV cut, when you put the cigar in to the opening, you can't actually decide how much you're going to take off. It actually has a block there. You're blocked by putting it all the way through. And that makes a big difference in terms of not only seeing how much you're taking off exactly, which is almost impossible with the SV cut, as you can see, but also the fact that you just don't have that flexibility in deciding how much you want to take off. When it comes to the S.T.Dupont, you can easily decide how much you want to take off. It goes all the way through, as you can see, and you can just see exactly where you're cutting, and it makes for a much better experience in terms of, the actual cutting of the cigar itself. There is a difference in price as well. The SV cut is about $75, while the S.T.Dupont, if we mentioned before, is just over $200. So after all of this, can I recommend the S.T.Dupont Double Cigar Cutter? The answer is absolutely, 100% yes. The product is extremely unique in terms that it is actually able to combine two different styles of cigar cut blades into one product, that both of which work very, very well. Both of them cut cigars wonderfully. I had very few problems with damaged wrappers or anything of that nature. And the product is very balanced. It's very well made. And perhaps more importantly, it is very easy to get exactly the cut that I want off of a cigar. I can easily put that cigar all the way through and decide exactly how much of that cap I am taking off, which is a very big deal in terms of what I'm trying to do. I have a whole bunch of different types of cigars that I'm cutting. I want to be able to actually be able to pick up a cutter and cut whatever I have in front of me without having to switch to another cutter or make excuses or something of that nature. This is a very light cutter. It's easy to carry around in your pocket. It's easy to forget about when it's in your pocket. It's very well made, and it looks very nice. All of these things are extremely important to me and to, I would imagine, a lot of other people. The one disadvantage, the price. And it is a fairly large disadvantage. $210 is a lot of money for a cigar cutter. But when you're talking about something that does cover the, it does the cuts for two different types of cutters and does it very well and will continue doing it for, quite a while in terms of, usability, then I think it's well worth the money. So for halfwheel.com, this is Brooks Whittington.